Beast Arises is a really frustrating series of books for a number of reasons that we're going to get into, but you can almost sum it up entirely by saying it's too damn long. Pretty much everything else stems from that. Not quite everything, but most things stem from that. There's a lot of flailing around to try and fill space. There's a lot of things that just don't go anywhere. So many elements that just get picked up and run for a while and then get discarded. It's a proper mess. However, there's a flip side to that coin, that while the series of books is too long, each individual book is way too short. It's a really weird decision, presumably made by, someone in corporate rather than someone who was actually an author. Well, that's what they were given, and I try not to judge them too much for it, but really 6.5 hours for an audiobook is no bueno. You're not going to get enough done. Especially when you then have to fill up with the requisite battle scenes and, weirdly, sections that just go nowhere. Weird tangential B-plots that are foisted in for really no reason at all. Looking at you, Predator Prey. Most of a book that goes nowhere. But first off, we should talk about some good things that happen in The Beast Arises. So first off, this is a series of books where the internal politics of the Imperium is a big deal. The rivalries of the High Lords of Terror are a huge deal. Just about the only character that, before the series started, that we knew about was Draconvangerich, the Master of Assassins, who is pretty much the central character of this series of books, which is good. He is awesome. He is not quite universally. There's 7 authors in this series of books, but he's generally well written. He has a nice arc to some degree. There's missteps, but it's good. There's good works. We like to see how he develops. The one thing that we know about Vangerich coming in is that he's going to be at the head of something after this period. So yeah, it's interesting to see him before then and to see how he develops. That's super cool. It's always good to get non-Space Marine characters in this universe who are interesting and that we want to learn about. In fact, I love the fact that within the context of just this series, he's actually quite sympathetic to some degree, within grimdark standards. But by the end, you kind of do see not just why he eventually will become this massive blood-soaked tyrant. You kind of think, he's got a point. So that's good, and that's a really difficult thing to pull off in a long series of books. I don't think the Horus Heresy managed to make Horus sympathetic more than for a half dozen pages at a time. So Vangerich is good. The other good stuff that we get is, I guess you'd say, secondary characters, because they're not that big of a deal. They don't impact the overall flow of the story all that much. But people like Inquisitor Venan, who is great. She's a good foil for Vangerich. She's a character that is not that big a deal, either within the stories but afterwards as well, so that they can just play with her and do fun things. That's good to see. Also, the Fifth Exemplar and their whole arc, which is magnificent. Love that to bits. That's a really nice, self-contained piece of storytelling about some people that I'm not sure if we had heard of before. They might have been made up entirely for The Beast Arises, but again, they have an arc. We explore kind of how good Space Marines go bad, broadly speaking. And again, that's super cool. That's really nice. We also get to see some Iron Warriors, and that's fun as well. They're not just kind of chaotic monsters. They're kind of, not rebellious. They're renegade, right? They're not controlled by the Imperium, but they don't really consider themselves to be ruled by the Dark Gods. They kind of have their own little empire that they're ruling and they're doing their own things with, and seeing them interact with other Space Marines also is really nice. We don't get that enough. So much of what we see of the formerly loyal Imperium is just, degenerate gibbering madmen, and that's no good. It's really good to see, and spoiler warning, it's really good to see that the Iron Warriors kind of talk around the Fifth Exemplar and saying, you know what, screw the Imperium. That's cool. That's nice. There's some nice incidental stuff here as well. They're playing the hits in terms of things that we previously knew showed up in this this period in history, right? So we see that the Death Watch gets created, and that's very fan-pleasing, that's all good. We see the Sisters of Silence, we see these sort of, things that they kind of feel that they have to touch on, which, to be honest, I think is to the detriment of the series overall, but I know that a lot of people have that, like, oh, I kind of want to see how it happened. Okay, fine, I'm not that against it. I mean, I kind of am, but I'm okay with other people liking things and them being in books, that's fine. But this kind of gives rise to too much of things that are, I suppose you'd say, crowd-pleasing, and not enough of things that you need to actually, write some books. These are Warhammer books, we expect lots of combat, lots of battles, lots of stuff. That's fine, it is to be expected. The problem is that so many of the action sequences in these books are meaningless. So many of them end with, well, and then the orcs showed up and we escaped, or words to that effect. It's fine to have those battle sequences, but it seems whenever we see them, at least for the first, not even for the first half, I mean for pretty much the whole run of the series, it seems like every single battle is one that the Imperium's going to lose, and when they don't quite lose, they don't just literally die to the last man, but they still lost, and maybe they, bunked out and escaped, and maybe they had something going on, but they don't win any battles. Where we do see them having success, it's either irrelevant to the overall plot, or it's, and then 10 seconds later something even worse happened. And again, the pacing is really weird, the flow is really weird, and it seems to put so much emphasis in the wrong places. This is all structural stuff. Being put in the position to write a filler book is always going to be difficult. It's always going to be tempting to just kind of fill it with action. Whatever, I guess we can accept that as sort of stemming from the initial problem of just having too many books. But there's creative choices that are a problem here as well. And it starts with the orcs as a whole. Because these aren't the orcs that we're used to. These are, I guess, more akin to what the orcs were initially sort of hinted at as being within the 40k universe, as being creations of the old ones that were supposed to help them win the war in heaven, yada yada yada, not that important. But in any case, the orcs were created to be this sort of incredibly powerful species, but they never quite got there because the people that created them sort of fell apart, and c'est la vie, the orcs that are left in the galaxy are the ones that are sort of fumbling and bumbling and don't really know what they're supposed to do. And that's how they end up with this sort of weird pseudo-society that's kind of a laugh, and it's fun and it's sort of interesting, but they don't have like a civilization despite existing for thousands of years. And, these books do look at that, and I suppose we should be thankful to that to some degree. But the real issue here is that the orcs, when they show up, even right from the first book, the orcs are comically overpowered. This new strain of orcs aren't just, more powerful and more awesome. They are able to break the fundamental rules of how this universe works. And that just, right from the get-go, makes it quite difficult to set the stakes appropriately. So when the orcs show up, they have this ridiculous, over-the-top, effectively infinite-ranged teleportation ability. So their method of attack is that they just effectively appear in front of you. And that's a bit of a problem by itself, because that again is not within the bounds of what the 40k universe normally allows. They don't just appear though, they don't just have their army teleports onto the surface of a planet. No, they're teleporting these attack moons, although weirdly they range in size a bunch. And that's frustrating as a reader as well, because it makes it quite difficult to contextualize whether beating them is important or not. But they teleport them into the system, they rain down their drop pods and their rocks and so forth, and lay waste to the worlds underneath them. And inside each attack moon, they have teleporter gates, so they can keep bringing more and more and more and more and more orcs through. Now again, this does break the rules of the 40k universe. You know, it's been reasonably well established that the only way to travel between interstellar bodies is via the warp, and that has its own sort of subset of rules to it, that it's quite unreliable for one, and that you can sort of sense things coming when they're in the warp, which is not to say like you perfectly know, but you know, they use astropaths and navigators to see what is coming. You can sense that something is just about to appear, and when it does appear, it has to appear further out in a solar system. You can't just appear over Terra, say. You have to come in further out because the gravity in the system would surely destroy you. So you start further out and you have to come in, and that's the way the orcs have always run. You know, they've always been into big, weird spaceships, space hulks, etc., but they still have to follow warp rules. And the fact that the attack moons don't do that, it makes them ridiculously powerful. As too does the infinite run of reinforcements that they can summon effectively at will from anywhere inside their whole empire. Not even the webway works like that. This is what sets it up so that the Imperium is going to lose pretty much every battle that it fights in this whole war, because wherever the Imperium fights, certainly fights on the ground, they are fighting infinite orcs, effectively infinite orcs. And they're not just regular orcs, oh no, these are super turbocharged, awesome orcs. And at that point, why are we even bothering? It seems like your obvious first step, once we know that there's going to be infinite numbers of orcs, is perhaps we shouldn't try and just literally hack each and every one of them to death. But of course that gets this whole series into lots of problems, because we need to see Space Marines being awesome and fighting hordes of orcs, but that's the one thing that makes no sense for them to do. That teleportation of attack moons is another huge problem as well though, because there is no way to defend against that, fundamentally. It doesn't matter how big your fleet is, because the attack moons can just go somewhere else. You can't chase them around because they move much faster than you, and you need massive fleets to take them on because they're so huge and are so incredibly beweaponed. So how do you fight this? You can't fight them on the ground. You can fight them in space if you can have a big fleet at the right place, but you can't really effectively fight a threat like this. It's just too big and too powerful. Oh, and did we mention that this is a galaxy-spanning threat, right? This invasion starts everywhere, all at the same time. And that's just, it's too big, it's too powerful, it's too threatening to the Imperium. Because while the Imperium is, it's incredibly powerful itself, but its great problem is that it's very slow, that it has to respond to things slowly and then push back. It can't just go all to arms instantly and summon fleets of ships like Dragon's Teeth. It doesn't work like that. And it's fine to kind of play off against that, but taking it to such ludicrous degrees, to such an intensely, hugely laughable degree of advantage for the orcs. I mean, by the end of the third book, I guess, certainly by the end of the fifth book, it looks like, damn, like the Imperium's just doomed. And this means that when we have all of the B-plots that run throughout this series of books, God, a lot of them are just... I know they're supposed to be there to try and sort of contextualize how big of an invasion is going on, but all it does is give a sense that it's kind of pointless for the Imperium to fight at all. Because we see all different kinds of worlds, and they're being invaded, and they all lose, and there is effectively no hope. And while you do need a proper enemy for the Imperium as a whole to fight like this, you gotta balance that stuff, man. Like, having something so that the orcs aren't arriving effectively already at full power. Have something there. but it's just kind of not. And that's one of the great weaknesses of the whole series, because they're orcs, they barely are characterized. There are no characters amongst the orcs. They are just a mass, an infinite, unending mass of doom. And that leaves it feeling like I don't even know what the right word is. It feels like the orcs aren't even an enemy at this point, because they have no really anything. They have no character. They don't really have goals, seemingly, except to kill and conquer. And that's such a missed opportunity. Even the introduction of the more civilized, for want of a better word, orcs, and the orc society, and these kinds of cool things that we've not seen before. It's like, yeah, that's kind of cool, but there's still this comically, overwhelmingly powerful invasion that there is no fighting against, except of course where the plot needs them to win. And that, it makes me want to bang my head against things when I see stuff like this, because at the end of the third book, the arrival of an attack moon in orbit over Terra is like a huge deal. Like, good lord, the Imperium surely is going to fall now, like instantly. And we see that, well, the orcs kind of seem to know that as well. When they send their orc ambassadors to Terra, it's like, well, that's kind of weird, but the orcs are still just going to sit in orbit for a long time until the Space Marines show up, and then they're going to get defeated by the Space Marines, and then we just don't see from this again. They don't send another attack moon, they don't send several. And apparently this attack moon is not like the actual moon-sized ones. This is big, but it's not that big. But this is the stuff that really frustrates me. Because the orcs have been set up to be too powerful. And then following the fifth book, the orcs are now suddenly much more defeatable than previously they were. And wherever we see the Imperium fighting, they don't win, they don't wipe out vast swathes of orcs. They don't start genociding planets, but wherever the Imperium goes to carry out these little submissions on the way to trying to kill the big primary orc boss, they win. And it just doesn't connect with the orcs that we've seen. We get the shock of seeing, the orc attack moon appear. We see the shock of its gravity whip smashing a cruiser in half in one blow, and then that's great. And then we see the whole of a Segmentum fleet manages to blow the moon up, and they're mortal, they're really dangerous, but they're mortal. We can win if we fight together, except we're out of time. But after this point, we don't actually see any attack moons actually being successful anywhere, and Earth is apparently safe. And what? And the reason for this, it goes back to this series is too long. Because following on from an unsuccessful invasion of Earth by the orcs, well, the Imperium should be rushing instantly to do the same back to the orcs. Obviously. But they don't. They take their sweet time. And then, we enter into this really frustrating passage where we see, 3 different but almost identical attempts to invade Ulanor, the orc homeworld, and 2 of them fail and 1 of them doesn't. But they are very, very similar. The Imperium knows more when it goes there, but it's kind of running out of resources, and it just feels so odd that we've had to do this 3 different times to learn how to defeat the orcs, and in all that time, and it has to be months, because the Imperium travels by warp. They don't travel by instant translation like the orcs do. So it's been months to go back and forth, and the beast has not sat down and thought, actually, we should probably send some more attack moons to where they're building up their forces again. That might be a good idea. But apparently not. Apparently he's happy to just, continue conquering random systems that no one has heard of. At no point does the beast, who is apparently, the orcs are apparently intelligent enough now, but the beast is never a tactical genius. He's not even as good as Ghazghkull Trucker would be in the present-ish day Imperium. Nah. he doesn't seem to be a good general, but he has this overwhelming force, an overwhelming threat. He could throw a galaxy's worth of attack moons directly at Terra and wipe it out, and no one could stop him. And he doesn't. There's also some weird choices going on in how other, I guess you'd say, bit players in this saga are getting represented. And I think the Mechanicus is a key part of that. Because while we know that the Mechanicus as a whole is kind of not really on the Imperium side, they're kind of on their own side. But as it turns out, as we run through the series, the Mechanicus knew that this massive Orc threat was coming. They didn't tell anyone. They deliberately chose not to tell anyone so that they could try and, salvage some technology and stuff, with the eventual aim that they could use the Orc teleportation technology to remove Mars from, the path of the beast. So they could just jump Mars away to somewhere safe, and then that would be fine, and they would leave the Imperium to burn. Now, this is a really terrible idea, and not just because, the Imperium is the only important thing in human civilization, but much more importantly, the Mechanicus knows that the Orcs can show up anywhere, right? And so just moving Mars somewhere else, well, Mars will be okay for a while, but if the beast is not stopped, the whole of the galaxy is going to fall under his control eventually. And, they have no plan. They have no plan at all to actually fight and defeat the Orcs. And so their ludicrous treachery and their complete disregard, not just for, human lives, but for tech adepts' lives, is ludicrous. It's fun to see that the Mechanicus has its own set of interests and values that aren't necessarily in line with what the whole Imperium's interests are. And that's fine and that's cool. But good God, man! This is the kind of treachery that you would normally expect from... I'm at a loss for words. Who in this setting is that kind of treacherous, where it even costs their own side in the end, but they can say, but we survived the longest. Like, why? This is the kind of stuff that makes, by the end of the last 2 books, you feel that Vangerich probably does have a point, and that maybe murdering all of the High Lords is probably a good idea. Maybe not so much for the rest of them, although, some of them are just kind of gotten rid of because they would ask too many questions, more so than anything else. But when Vangerich says, no, not having this, we're not having another iteration of the Mechanicus betrays the Imperium, nope, I'm having you killed, I'm replacing you with someone else. Like, that is not a decision that is unpopular with the reader. This does not look like Vangerich has lost his marbles. This does not look like Vangerich is being a dictator. This looks like Vangerich is doing exactly what, from earlier in the series, he claimed that he would do, which is, I will get rid of the rot in the Senatorum. And good heavens, the Mechanicus deserved it. But this sort of nicely leads us into something of a problem in the last book. So this is as Vangerich starts murdering people, and he joins in the Rain and Blood, and all good, and he will eventually get his comeuppance. The thing is, the book's just too short, and what that really needs, because Vangerich canonically is in charge for a good while. It's not like he immediately gets his comeuppance after his run of assassinations. No, he's in charge for a while, but the book does not make it feel like that is the case. What perhaps would have been a much better approach, we'll deal with that another time, but a much more sensible thing to do is to run the 12th book into, Vangerich is killing people and establishing his position, but we know he's going to be broadly sympathetic because he's been the main character throughout. When he's on screen, he's always good to watch. He's always fun, he's always interesting, and he's kind of the only sane man throughout the whole run of this series of books. He's the only person that we've seen who is in favor of humanity broadly surviving, who seems to have the opinion that, you know what, let's save the Imperium and then we can squabble later. So obviously he's going to be likable. But we have this really short book to cover a bunch of assassinations, a bunch of other stuff, and then, by the way, Vangerich has gone too far, and Thane is going to come back and kill him. And it's just all lumped together, and we never really see the fallen Vangerich. Like, it looks like he's still kind of the same guy at the end. And that's really frustrating, because we didn't really see him live long enough to become a bad guy. We saw him live long enough to recognize that everyone else is a bad guy, so he might as well. And that's not quite the same thing. It's not quite the same thing, damn it. And so again, we run into this problem with this really long series of books. 12 books is a long span of pages, but very important events are being compressed into relatively small parts of books. And it doesn't give things chances to breathe. It doesn't give us a real anything. It lacks heft and it lacks weight. And this stuff happens time and again throughout the whole run of the series, where we see very short passages, weirdly short passages of things. So, we see Vulcan, kind of out of nowhere, comes back to lead the Imperium, takes on no leadership himself, is just, I'm a Primarch, I've got a big stick, it's all good. Does effectively nothing. Goes to Eleanor in the first attack, and is never seen again. And you think, well, we dedicated the whole book before this. The whole book before this was about finding Vulcan, because Vulcan was going to make a difference. And we didn't even get to see him sit around for more than a whole book before he's gone forever now. And it's much the same with the Sisters of Silence. It's much the same with the Death Watch. It's much the same with lots of these elements, where they show up, and it's like, oh, this is quite cool, I'm liking this. And then, the second attack on Eleanor happens, and the Sisters of Silence kind of didn't make that much of a difference, really. So why did we spend the book looking for them? Why is there a whole book about the foundations of the Death Watch? Because the Death Watch aren't even that important at the end of the third attack on Eleanor. They're not actually that important. They're kind of cool, and the idea of multiple chapters, multiple different types of tactics, and that we can use these in surgical strikes on bits of the Orcs, it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool, except that the 5th Exemplar are already doing that stuff. We see them doing almost exactly that, where they go and board Orky ships, cripple the reactors, cripple the guns, go back aboard their home ships and disappear and leave them to explode. So the Death Watch is, it's nice, it's fun, it's interesting enough to see, but it just doesn't go anywhere. There's no reason why the Death Watch specifically was necessary in the fall of the Beast. And there's no reason why the Sisters of Silence were necessary in the fall of the Beast. There's no reason why Vulcan was necessary. And yet we continue to sort of flail around and jump from these one to the next, and they sit there for a book and a half, a short book, and they often get sandwiched between two books. But we don't really see them because, we've just founded the Death Watch, okay, great. Yeah, but this is still going to be a story that's about the Last Wall, which gets a lot of screen time for something that's not that interesting. It's cool to see that the Sons of Dawn come back together to defend Terra, that's fine. It's nice to see. It's like, we got this, thousands of Space Marines that come together. Awesome, that's good. It's nice that we get some screen time for some chapters we don't hear a lot of, that's fine. I even kind of like seeing that the Black Templars are quite different from the other Sons of Dawn. That's cool as well. This is all good stuff. But the huge amount of emphasis that's put on the Last Wall as, are you Space Marines trying to reform the Legion? It's like, no, we're literally defending you from a massive invasion of Orcs. What's wrong with you people? And there's so much emphasis put on the fact of, you're reforming a Legion. Where it's like, look around, buddy. These are, 6 different chapters. We just happen to be flying in close formation. Is that a problem for you? Because apparently it is. I think the last nail in the coffin of this series is the fact that, other than Vangerich, it kind of actually doesn't have a main character. It does for a while, right? In that Corland, the last remaining Imperial Fist. He is, in theory, the main character for a long time, except right at the end, he just dies. And I get this, you know, oh, he dies to save the Imperium stuff, and that's all very, very appropriate. But at the same time, we've been following this guy for like, what, 9 books? And he's been a big force in making all of this happen. You know, and he dies in a forlorn hope invasion of Ullanor anyway. You know, he dies in the second battle of Ullanor. He doesn't even survive to be at the battle where the beast is defeated. And that's annoying as hell, because while I like Maximus Stain, I think he's a good character to have around. I like that he, like Corland, is the last of his chapter because the Fist Exemplar all turn rogue. I like that. I like that, you know, there's good, interesting stuff that's going on with him. But Corland is the guy that we start the series with, and he just disappears. And while I am a fan of this, you know, anyone can die in storytelling, I think that that's good. But you can't have a series that runs this long that then abandons really the only character that's not Vangerich that anyone cares about all too deeply. You know, there's been a lot of bloody silly things that we had to get through in order to start liking Corland, including, you know, Dan Abbnett's ridiculous brain fart in deciding that the Imperial Fists have multiple names and they're weirdly chosen names. And I know that they're trying to get this connection between the beast that says I am Slaughter and that Corland's name is also Slaughter, and there's some mirroring there, and that's what you should do. But importantly, if you're going to go to all of this ridiculous effort to set up that Corland is the mirror image of the beast, Corland needs to win. He doesn't just randomly get killed in a poorly advised invasion that he was not well prepared for. And it means that the only characters that run the whole span of the series are Vangerich Venand and Beast Cruel. Well done, Abbnett, another mirroring thing. But again, Beast Cruel, who is an assassin in the employ of Grandmaster Vangerich, he doesn't kill the beast either. So what's the point? Why did you have to give this assassin this stupid name? And while it's nice to see that Beast survives until the end and that he is the one that will put down Vangerich, fine, it's all good. But he's not a very deep character, is he? And we see this, you know, in the final moments. The people on screen are Vangerich, who's getting his comeuppance, Beast, who no one really knows all that well and got turned into an Eversaw anyway, and Maximus Stain, who, okay, fine, he's sticking to his word to come back and sort Vangerich out, but he's not the guy we came in with. He's the guy that replaced the guy in the 4th season. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes here, but it seems to me that if I was planning to write 12 books to do this big span, then I would have at least said, okay, who are the main characters in this series? How is this going to plot out? How is this going to be something that we identify with and see them develop over time? Because, you know, you're working with a lot of different writers, a lot of different stories, a lot of different types of stories, some that are very, you know, closely contained, some that are very broad, some that don't have a lot of time. And we need to be asking ourselves these kinds of questions when we start writing a massive, like a directly connected series of fiction like this. Because to my mind, this really does come off like a TV show, and where the guy playing the principal character asked for too much money and got fired, and someone else got drawn in to replace them, and you know that was just what happened, and there was not a lot that anyone could do about that, and the authors had to write scripts that kind of tried to rationalize it. But this is a series of books. You know, you can do whatever you like with it. There's no reason why these things have to happen the way that they did. And I think that's going to be the next thing that I want to talk about, right? I want to do my version of how The Beast Arises should have come together, and how it tries to create just a stronger sense of the narrative We don't want to lose the action. You know, I'm not saying that we need huge numbers of soliloquies and whatever. I'm just saying that amongst the action, we need to put things in order so that they make sense. And, well, we'll try and do that for next week. Oh, I'm sorry for skipping a Sunday. I have been spectacularly busy, but I am committed to at least trying with this. We'll see how things pan out. I do at least have my outline for how The Beast Arises should be done. So I just have to record it when I get some time to do so. So we'll make sure that that works out. All right, well, peace out. Goodbye.